In the year 2014, the Naruto manga would enter the final stages of the war arc. At this point, the story had developed drastically, whether it be through new powers, stronger villains, shocking revelations, and insane world building. It was a lot, to say the least. And with everything I just mentioned, all of these elements weren't exactly handled perfectly, to put it lightly. While I don't hate the war arc, I would be lying if I said I didn't have my fair share of problems here and there, even if I did enjoy the majority of it. So when I was reading the Naruto manga week to week in 2014, I desperately wanted a conclusion that would leave me satisfied with this journey I had been following for years. It needed to be something that I could read and say, this is why I love Naruto. And thankfully, my wish was answered through the final fight of Naruto versus Sasuke. This conflict between the two characters the show centers on the most was everything I wanted, as I couldn't imagine the series ending on a stronger note than this. It's an authentic final farewell to this story that was 700 chapters in the making. Every element of this fight having what made Naruto so successful and captivating for those that grew to love it. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the final rematch between Naruto and Sasuke, discussing just how incredible and well designed this battle is, as after rereading and rewatching it many times, I have a lot to talk and praise about with how it all got handled. I should also mention that I won't be covering just the manga, but the anime as well, since it's most definitely the better version of the two, thanks to a lot of extended scenes that only help push up the quality of this material even more. But of course, the manga works wonders in certain areas too, so expect a bit of back and forth, since I do want to show both sides of how this final encounter was adapted. Since I will be showing scenes from the anime on screen, don't be too shocked if it's edited strangely with a lot of cuts. It's all to avoid copyright, but knowing YouTube, it probably won't do too much. And finally, to state the obvious, this video will include spoilers for the series. If by some reason you haven't watched this fight already, then what are you doing? Go and watch it right now. But of course, do come back to this video after. Quickly gotta give a shout out to LxstGhxul over on Twitter, who took the time to have a glance at my script to see if any extra information could be added in some places. Working on a video this big can sometimes be very daunting, so having an extra pair of eyes was very much welcome. And so, just like my analysis video on the very first fight Naruto and Sasuke had, we can't jump straight into the battle itself. I believe it's very important to talk about the continuous evolution of these characters' mindsets to grasp more of a firm understanding of what led them to this point. It's going to be a lot, but please bear with me. So, with that being said, we need to look back at the seeds that were planted, which made this final rematch all the more meaningful as a proper send-off to the series. If there's anything that should be made clear, it's how both fights at the final valley are completely different to one another. While it does still carry over certain themes that I'll touch upon later, the two boys that once fought each other are now very different characters compared to what they were back then. I'd say most of us can agree that this is especially the case for Sasuke. Compared to Naruto, his change in character is a lot more obvious, so I won't spend too much time talking about his growth. But one of the key things to keep in mind is how Sasuke is continuously setting new goals for himself that each expand upon his previous one. And I think there's an interesting discussion to be made here, as while Sasuke is continuously going down a darker path, it's not like the answers he's getting is leading him further away from the truth he wants to find, but instead closer. The truth behind how corrupt the shinobi system is was something only Sasuke could learn through this dark bloody pathway he took. How ironic that a system that preaches for peace and justice makes this possible through death and misery that they try to slip under the rug so it doesn't become apparent for others on a surface level. This concept works perfectly for characters such as Danzo, considering his organization known as the Foundation is located beneath the village, out of sight from the average eye, all while questionably cruel and dark missions were underway. And as we learn at the 5 Kage Summit, who's to say this isn't the same for every other village? They all have their underground dirty secrets that they believe will benefit their homeland for peace. And while to an extent this can be the case, it's only going to result in nothing more than short-term peace, as other villages will hold resentment to how they've been treated and carry out revenge. This is a system Sasuke's brother fell into and became a victim of, and now Sasuke is just another casualty added into the mix. However, Sasuke doesn't want to fall down the same pathway Itachi once did. His path will be different than others, one that he sees as justful and right. But to tackle this problem, he needed to make sure he was finding the root of the cause. laws, leading to his conversations with the Hokage. Sasuke needed to learn exactly what a village is. What are shinobi? Is life just all about enduring for the sake of these things to remain relevant? There's a part of this entire system that Sasuke sees a problem with. The world has been tainted in blood and needs to change for the better. However, this means casting aside the past in order to start fresh. And for Sasuke, there was one problem with that, and it was Naruto. Of course, I'll be touching up on Sasuke's character a lot more later, since he's definitely the most intriguing and important factor in this fight, especially with its resolution, considering there's a big chunk of his character arc that gets wrapped up here. However, for right now, I want to move on to spending a lot of time talking about Naruto and his development after his failure to bring back Sasuke, as while his motives don't change as drastically as Sasuke's does, I think there's a really special and more so human element to Naruto's growth that will eventually lead him into his dream of becoming Hokage. I've always found that post-time skip Naruto Uzumaki is all about self-improvement when it comes to the action of understanding. Naruto failed to bring back his friend, someone who he considered to be a true family member, arguably being the most important mission out of everything he had done up to that point that he desperately did not want to lose. While he had the strength, he severely lacked understanding, which didn't allow his words to get through to Sasuke compared to his previous opponents. And to make matters worse, Naruto goes through a pretty significant downward spiral after the 2-year time skip. Not only was he practically useless to stop Gaara from being killed, but again he fails to bring Sasuke home, now not only lacking understanding, but strength too. Naruto is now more than 2 steps behind Sasuke, as clearly what he's doing isn't working, and I believe this is something Naruto slowly starts to notice. An example is seen with Naruto's Rasen Shuriken training, as while learning this technique is beneficial in Naruto in the strength department, Naruto says a really interesting comment during this process: only wind can assist and magnify fire. I say this is interesting because it's a moment that displays Naruto not just thinking for himself, but for Sasuke too. Rather than looking for strength to take him on, he's considering how this strength can be used to assist him. While this can be seen as a minor comment, even though it comes into fruition later on, it's still a step forward for Naruto that shows an attempt of trying to form a closer connection to Sasuke. However, because he's trying to understand Sasuke, he's also picking up bad habits from his character, such as trying to do things alone, which is exactly what he does in his battle with Kakazu, as well as later in the war, which I'll touch up on later. And what's interesting is that around this time, Sasuke starts to form a team instead of working alone, perhaps being an indicator of trying to form a bond similar to the one he cherished with his time in the Leaf Village with Team 7. This benefits Sasuke greatly when it comes to his hunt for Itachi, fight against Killer Bee, and as well as paving the way to Danzo, even if things did turn out for the worse for his team in the end. This clearly pokes holes in Sasuke's ideology towards the end of the series, where he believes walking a lonesome path is the most beneficial road to success. And going back to Naruto, we get to see him figuring out how unsuccessful being alone is. After his fight with Kakazu, he isn't exactly satisfied with himself compared to his other victories we've seen throughout the series. The new jutsu he spent learning all this time felt like it was for nothing due to how much it damages his body, to the point that he gets warned to never use it again. It's a conflicting situation for Naruto to be in, as he becomes slightly unsure with himself. As said before, Shippuden is more so a learning process for Naruto on what he lacked before the time skip, and these lessons sometimes appear suddenly, such as Jiraiya's death, most definitely being the biggest setback for Naruto up to this point. This is the moment when Naruto became closest to understanding what type of feelings had been running through Sasuke. That feeling of hatred towards someone, a hole in your heart from the loss of an individual you cherished, a family member that has been taken from you in the cruelest way possible through the act of being killed. And I think what's so great about this moment in the story is the sheer amount of emotional weight that gets placed onto Naruto, and that's all because of pain. Pain not only forces Naruto to realize these feelings of loss that Sasuke has experienced, but he also provides an extra message that Naruto should be considering. This is of course the cycle of hatred. Naruto Naruto was ignorant. He didn't know what to do when it came to finding everlasting peace, only running off his mouth again to something he couldn't comprehend, just like in his fight with Sasuke. But due to Pain being more knowledgeable in this area of human understanding because of his experiences, he manages to easily poke holes in Naruto's basic principles of what he believes to be justice. This breaks Naruto mentally, and for the first time, we see this rather stubborn attitude get stripped away as he's forced to realize the fault in his behavior when it comes to his own ideals, a truth that has now finally been exposed to himself. Naruto didn't understand. While he was thinking with a smaller perspective, individuals such as Pain and Sasuke were thinking about the bigger picture. If he killed Pain, this would just repeat another cycle of hatred, and if he stopped Sasuke back in the final valley through strength alone, they would still leave this heavy and unfulfilled desire upon Sasuke that he so clearly wants to accomplish no matter what. What I'm saying here is how strength alone cannot fix issues in this shinobi world. There needs to be some type of understanding from both sides. Hell, that's one of the reasons why the unison sign is such an important element in shinobi combat. While there's going to be conflict that leads to one side winning when it comes to the physical side of things, no matter what, it always ends with the unison sign, symbolizing a certain type of peace, an understanding, or more so acknowledgement of one another. There needs to be some type of mutual commitment. Going forward to the end of the Pain Assault arc, while Naruto wins the battle of ideology with Nagato, he still hasn't fully come up with an answer on how to tackle the cycle of hatred, this eventually being represented as Sasuke. Leading into the 5 Kage summit, Sasuke had become the main source of hatred in the world to the point where a war could break out because of him. Through Naruto's experience with Nagato, he saw the bigger picture this time around and wanted to stop this cycle from continuing because of Sasuke, and so he sought out the right Kage and pleaded. Yet again, there was no mutual understanding. While Naruto understood the situation, his lack of a definitive solution failed him. At this point, Naruto falls down another spiral of despair, unsure of what direction Sasuke was targeting his hatred towards and how he could even begin to comprehend some type of solution. His discussion with Obito does help develop Naruto's mindset in some form, however, especially when it comes to targeting that hatred towards the one who inherits the will of fire. The topic of destiny is something I'm going to save later in the video when it becomes more prevalent, but in short, knowing that Sasuke is someone who is destined to direct his hatred towards others creates an answer for Naruto. This eventually leads into his confrontation with Sasuke at the end of the Kage Summit, to where he attempts to connect with him again through all of his experiences till now. This time he handles the situation differently, not being forceful or stubborn, but understanding. Along with this, he also states how Sasuke was a crucial factor in his life when it came to filling up a hole in his heart, someone who his loneliness and insecurities looked towards to better himself, and for that he's simply thankful to have met him. At this moment, Sasuke has sunk so low into the depths of hatred that he dismisses Naruto's words, stating he isn't going to change and that there's only 2 choices: to kill him and be known as a hero, or be killed by his hands. This correlates with Obito's words earlier regarding the cycle of destiny Naruto has become a part of with Sasuke, where they're destined to fight. And for this situation, if an understanding between one another isn't known, then both of them will die. This will be the outcome if they decide to let destiny dictate their fate. However, that's not Naruto's character. Like he said to Neji, fight against the shackles of destiny that life has thrown at you if you're not happy with it. And that's exactly what he plans to do, and why he's so fixated on forming a deeper connection with Sasuke to break out from this cycle. Sasuke is aware of this fixation, however, in clear frustration for what possible reason Naruto has behind all of this after everything he's done, leading into Naruto's answer of, because you're my friend, but now having a whole other meaning behind it. Naruto saying the same response to Sasuke in the first fight at the final valley is completely different to this response, even if they are the exact same words. Rather than it being a phrase that can partially be seen as a guilt mechanism as well as something that is only centered around Naruto's feelings, it's now represented as Naruto saying, Sasuke Sasuke doesn't need to bear this burden alone. He's informing Sasuke that there is someone in this world who can learn to understand him, which is why he says to bear all of his burdens and to throw it all on him, as only when someone truly understands one another is when the hatred goes away, just like with Nagato. Because at the end of the day, that's what people who care for you are here to do. They help take on your suffering, as it isn't something that should be tackled alone. And while Naruto was definitely one step closer to Sasuke in this instance, his words needed to also be true to himself. During the war, Naruto takes up the mantle of not just being the only person that can take on Sasuke, but as well as being the sole individual who can single-handedly stop this war. He's taken on too many roles at once due to knowing how crucial of a key factor his strength is, as it's made Naruto lose focus of the lessons he taught himself at the 5 Kage summits. This is something Itachi notices, and gives Naruto the necessary reality check he needs, informing him of his hypocrisy with his behavior, as Naruto has stated numerous times, especially to Sasuke, that the people around him helped him get to the position he's in now. Continuing to neglect those around you is not only a near similar pathway that Sasuke took, but if Naruto lets this continue, he'll only end up being exactly like the person who started this war to begin with. Relying on others is what makes one succeed, and that's the lesson Naruto learned at the Kage summit, knowing that Sasuke was doing this all alone and that there needed to be some type of connection and understanding between them both to reach a successful outcome. And there's honestly no better person than Itachi to relay this information to Naruto, as he himself understands the pain and burden of carrying everything by yourself and that it will most surely lead to some type of failure. Thanks to Itachi, Naruto gets put back onto the right path even with all of this power he's attained, something Sasuke wasn't able to do during the first fight at the final valley after receiving more power from his curse mark. However, unlike Naruto, Itachi had the understanding he needed to get through to someone, this case being Naruto, allowing him to stand on the war zone with more trust than ever on his comrades, essentially being one of the many few crucial pieces of Naruto's character that infuriates Obito of the type of person he could have become. The war is supposed to be a display of Naruto's qualities that make him fit to be a candidate for Hokage. He's united the shinobi villages to not only be shown as someone they can trust, but as well as people he himself can fully depend on without a second thought. It's a new level of maturity for Naruto being shown through this arc, and I think one of the best ways it's demonstrated is when Sasuke appears on the battlefield. Of course, there is a bit of back and forth competition between them since they are rivals, but Naruto doesn't say anything to Sasuke at all when it comes to the topic of bringing him back to the village. I think at this point Naruto is aware that Sasuke has other motives in mind straight away when he says his idea of becoming Hokage is nothing like his. Again, thanks to Itachi, this is something Naruto realizes after previously being told what makes someone truly become Hokage. Both of their end goals may sound the same, but in reality they couldn't be more different. And instead of confronting Sasuke about how wrong his idea of not caring if he's acknowledged or not to become Hokage is, he instead doesn't rebuttal it and decides to show through his actions why his path is guaranteed for success more than Sasuke's, and that's through relying on others. This is where we get to see some payoffs to Naruto's lessons he learned near the start of the time skip, such as using his Rasen Shuriken to assist Sasuke like he had originally wanted, to then acquiring help from the combined forces of the Allied Shinobi Alliance to take down Obito. It's a demonstration of how things can't be done alone. That's why Obito failed, followed by Madara and then Kaguya. Currently, Naruto is standing firm in his beliefs and isn't wavering, made even more clear with his answer to the Sage of Six Paths with wanting to protect his comrades, this of course including Sasuke. So, with both of these characters now having a final answer for how they'll revolutionize the world, who exactly was going to be the one that would lead this change? I think Naruto knew when everything was done with the war, there still presented an issue with Sasuke, and after Kaguya's defeat was the moment for Naruto to see whether Sasuke had recognized just how powerful of a strength it is to have comrades who will support you to the very end, which was exactly the type of person Naruto wanted to be to Sasuke if they reached some type of understanding. However, for Sasuke, his beliefs hadn't wavered, not yet.
だがまずはこの無限つく読みの中今の5影どもを処刑する
This moment is 100% one of the best twists in the series. First of all, the artwork that's been displayed here is incredible. Kishimoto really making sure to create a chilling and unnerving atmosphere from Sasuke's shocking statement about his true intentions. Not only is the plot point really strong, but thanks to how the artwork has been designed with the excessive amount of shading and cross-hatching added to Sasuke's face, it ends up packing a much greater punch. And I think that's great how Kishimoto didn't just rely on this plot point alone to carry the scene, as he clearly wanted the visuals to match the energy of the story he's telling. Really superb work of a mangaka who knows what he's doing. Yet one of my favourite moments of this scene is how the others react to this, as you would expect everyone to be shocked and surprised, which they are, like Kakashi and Sakura, but this can't be said the same for Naruto. There's no reaction whatsoever from him straight after Sasuke's words, and I love that. Not only does it further back up the idea that Naruto knew there still presented an issue with Sasuke once the war was finished, but again it shows a new level of maturity. There's no screaming, no trying to play off the situation, no childish behavior, just a silenced look from a boy who knew this moment would arrive sooner or later. Immediately after Sasuke's announcement to the world, he places all of the Biju under his control, most likely to harvest their power for the future, but will soon get rid of them altogether. As Sasuke explains, he wants to destroy and then rebuild, sparking a revolution that will finally put a change to the continuous failures that the shinobi system has produced and only continue to reproduce through every generation. I was fully caught up to Naruto when these chapters came out, and I remember there was quite a bit of backlash since many considered this to be an out of nowhere action for Sasuke, just to squeeze in another fight that fans had been dying to see. And to this, I say they're completely wrong. From what I discussed earlier, there was plenty of foreshadowing that was feeding the reader small bits of information in regards to Sasuke's motives, especially with this scene in the war where Naruto yells to Sasuke to put out his flames that's been used on the Ten Tails, otherwise the Biju inside could also get affected. Except this is something Sasuke doesn't go along with, replying with "no, they all burn," followed by having an inner monologue where he literally says he's going to put an end to this failing system. The signs were definitely there, and his character stayed consistent throughout all of these chapters of build up leading to this payoff. An interesting conversation between the Sage of Six Paths and Naruto also takes place in this moment, as the sage practically admits he messed up again because the destined cycle of conflict has carried over into this generation too. But to that, Naruto's reply is great. I'm not Ashura and Sasuke isn't Indra either. Things won't play out like they did in the past between those brothers, and as well as Hashirama and Madara, where no compromise between both parties was met. Naruto and Sasuke are trapped on a pathway that will lead to death if they only fight, something Naruto said all the way back at the 5 Kage summit. But Naruto of course wants to break this cycle here and now, and what better place to end it than at the final valley. Kishimoto knew exactly what he was doing by having this rematch take place here. Not only is it just a really iconic location that's for sure bound to get a lot of fans excited, but I think it also suggests other things in relation to the story. For example, Sasuke was the one that suggested they fight here, the place where in the past a separation of ideals was made, a change from the life they were living which will for sure impact the future to come. This parallels not only the first fight but also Madara and Hashirama, and I do think Sasuke deciding to fight in this location gives him some confidence to make him feel like he's in his element since he did win the previous fight here. It's even in his first line of dialogue when replying to Naruto about how things will unravel the same way with him losing. Some nice elements that add on to Sasuke's confident demeanor that gets displayed later in this fight. But before all of that, the debate of what it means to be a true Hokage is an important discussion to have to understand the clear ideologies of each character for what they're fighting for. While Sasuke says he wants to be Hokage, his definition for it is something he alone came up with rather than what the general idea of what being a Hokage actually is. And I think there's something to take note of there, as the most common description for a Hokage is one that is pretty much universally agreed by everyone, which stands with Naruto's beliefs of having comrades around you, while Sasuke came up with his description for what it means to be Hokage all by himself, all alone, just like the path he's willing to take. However, to Sasuke, this doesn't matter, as what it means to be Hokage to others is just another part of the past that's about to be cast away. While it may seem like Sasuke is disregarding the amount of sacrifice Itachi had to commit to, it's because of that Sasuke is able to see the right path. Itachi took on everything, yet at the same time it's now all for nothing because he couldn't kill Sasuke. Sasuke is that piece of hatred Itachi left behind mind that eventually spread and grew into something of its own accord. But Sasuke says he won't make the same mistake as Itachi. He says he's all alone, which allows him to fulfill his role successfully. However, that's not quite true because of Naruto's presence. The fact that Sasuke insisted on not only fighting Naruto, but as well as at the final valley, shows that there is some type of connection there that he needs to get rid of to walk down his path, which is why he's dealing with it all personally. All of the hatred, suffering, and darkness that the shinobi world has to offer is something he'll take on by himself. And again, here we start to see clear differences in the paths each of them took. Naruto has already gone through a similar situation during the war, where he tried to take on everything and that clearly wasn't working in his favor, which is why it's all the more important for Naruto to connect with Sasuke on this, because unlike in their first fight, this is actually something Naruto can fully understand without seeming arrogant. But this is the start of Sasuke's descent into the shadows where no connections can take place. It doesn't matter what others think about his plan anyway, all of the villages will be put under his control by force, similar to Nagato, scaring the world into a state of peace where no one is ever given the chance to fight back. He'll be the world's savior and handle any hatred that stems from this world, the only one to dirty his hands. This is Sasuke's ideology, an idea that hasn't been manipulated by others, but instead one that is an accumulation of events that Sasuke has dealt with in his life to grow into this role he needs to fulfill. This is what it means to be a true Hokage. He's defining the meaning of Hokage, and if you look at it, it's not that far off from the actual name itself. Kage translates to shadow, all while Hokage translates to fire shadow. As Sasuke wants to get rid of the system where there's practically no Kages, just him from the shadows watching over the world and dictating order, away from the light. Almost like the meaning of Kage now falls onto Sasuke due to the correlation it shows. However, you might have noticed by now that Sasuke isn't exactly true to himself. His plan has multiple contradictions that mostly stem from him feeling emotions. There's even instances in this dialogue exchange where he stops talking mid-sentence. While a small scene, it's a big slip up to the role of God he's trying to play, one that shouldn't have any connections to the past he's declared his independence from. It's made intentional that this is something Naruto picks up on, because the very next panel is just Naruto silently waiting on Sasuke's next words. Nevertheless, as stated before, no amount of words can get through to him at this moment. All hope of a conversation had gone, and so the only way left was through physical conflict, where thoughts can be read through no more than a trade of blows. The next section is mainly going to be focused on the physical fight, and because of that, I'll for the most part be talking about the anime, but I will be bringing in manga panels to show comparisons of each adaptation. The reason for this is because of just how much the anime elevates the material presented in the manga to a whole other level of quality. For starters, just look at how absolutely stunning the visual direction is, and this is without even showing any fight scenes on screen. And honestly, I think that just goes to show how well directed these two anime episodes of the Naruto Shippuden anime are, as we don't need any fighting to take place to appreciate how gorgeous everything looks. The color palette is very dark and gloomy compared to how the previous episodes were presented, creating a very chilling atmosphere where it looks like the end of the world is about to take place. Only in this scenario, Sasuke will be the one to pass that judgment. The character designs for both Naruto and Sasuke are also visibly strong, as there's a lot more sense of maturity within their characters thanks to their faces being drawn more so rectangular in comparison to the pointy chins we saw literally one episode ago, or even a more rounded approach that was taken in their first fight in the final valley. This example especially shows how much growth their characters have gone through to reach this point in their lives. So as you guys can probably tell, these two episodes were in very good hands, mainly thanks to the episode director Hiroyuki Yamashita, who worked on fights such as Team Taka vs Killer Bee, Obito vs the Mist Ninja, Madara vs the Shinobi Alliance, and of course Kakashi vs Obito. Being an episode director means you're essentially in control of the main creative process, from storyboard artist to animation supervisor, as generally majority of the time these roles will all be to the same person, or at least it was for this case. Hiroyuki Yamashita is a renowned legend with his work on the Naruto franchise, so you just know for a fact anything he touches will be brimming with quality. I remember when I was waiting for these two episodes to come out, as there was so much hype and anticipation surrounding its release. not only because of it being the final part of a story 14 years in the making, but as well as there being a 3-week wait for these episodes to release. The wait was painful to say the least, but a lot of us fans that were waiting knew these episodes were going to be special, considering this fight was being promoted like crazy in Japan with advertisements everywhere. And I don't think I've ever seen something like this, where just a fight alone was getting its own set of advertisements for people to tune into. Studio Pierrot did not want anyone to miss out on this, as there was definitely a lot of passion put behind the development of these episodes. It also helped that this battle spanned across 2 whole episodes that were released together, so it was also being promoted as an hour-long spectacle if you're including advertisement breaks. So yeah, you get the picture. These 2 episodes of the Naruto Shippuden anime were in great hands and were handled with care, so at last, let's dig into it. The anime is all about extending the material presented in the manga, and the episodes here are no different. There's a brilliant anime-only scene at the start of the episode that shows Neji's conversation with Naruto back during the Sasuke retrieval mission, as Neji delivers a really great message about Naruto's eyes being better than his. This statement not only being true back then, but it's now more meaningful as Naruto can see more than ever just how much suffering Sasuke is taken on by himself, as through this fight he hopes to finally break this burden. And so, with the conversation about their ideologies at a stalemate, the fight at last begins, delivering a superb sequence of Naruto and Sasuke's growth through the ages, in not only themselves individually, but their rivalry, as the transitions are so seamless that it only further adds on to the anticipation of them finally clashing. What should also be appreciated is how both characters aren't moving in the same way, but instead shows us what their characters are like without any words being needed. For example, Sasuke performs a few flips that, while unnecessary and show off, do match Sasuke's character due to how natural the act of being cool comes to him. And meanwhile, Naruto lacks any style and is more so just taking big steps with his arms swinging back and forth to show his rather straightforward and simple approach compared to Sasuke. For the next around 4 minutes of this fight, there is no music to be heard whatsoever, just a clashing of attacks, as it seems fairly clear whoever was in charge of the sound design really wanted the viewers to focus on nothing but this for this period of time. And I say that because it matches the statement of 2 shinobi being able to understand each other through an exchange of fists, giving more emphasis to the attacks thanks to there being no music, as it's like we're seeing a conversation between them in motion. While it's most definitely a fight where both are trying to beat the other down, it still shows a connection between them both that only they can accomplish with one another. And speaking of connection, there's great moments in this fight that show just how much Naruto and Sasuke understand each other, as this isn't just any ordinary fight between 2 nobodies, but a battle between 2 friends who for the most part have grown up beside one another. This is shown through examples like Sasuke stopping Naruto from performing the hand sign for the Shadow Clone Jutsu 5 times before he can at last pull it off. It's a great detail informing us that Sasuke is aware of how much Naruto relies on this technique to be more versatile in his fights, and this is demonstrated straight away when Naruto performs the Shadow Clone Jutsu when given the opportunity, and immediately uses his clones in a very beneficial way for him that successfully helps land his first solid attack on Sasuke. There's also a lot of scenes within this battle that can easily be recognized as homages to the original fight they had at the Final Valley all those years ago. They don't feel forced for the sake of nostalgia, as it fits into the battle pretty seamlessly. There's a lot more of these as we go on, so I'll make sure to bring up any that I noticed. But as we progress through the fight and finally get to the final powered up states, we see a spectacular moment of both of their fists clashing, which I need to say looks really gorgeous in the manga too. And while we're talking about the manga, majority of the events that were seen in the anime, such as the hand-to-hand combat, hand side stealing, a universal pull, and many more were all anime original content. The fight in the manga starts with the arm clash and then proceeds into both Naruto and Sasuke transforming into the strongest forms. And while this is rather fast paced and it's a shame Kishimoto didn't add any extra combat scenes before all of this, I can still understand the premise he was going for. While the first fight in the Final Valley makes Naruto and Sasuke start at their weakest forms and has them end it in their strongest, for this fight is the complete opposite, where both characters start off in their strongest, which explains why Kishimoto makes them both instantly power up and then end it at their weakest. So from that perspective of looking at things, I can appreciate how Kishimoto handled the manga version, since the anime is there for people who want an extended version of events anyway. It should also be noted that the majority of this fight, as they lead up into their strongest forms, takes place on the upper level of the Final Valley to represent their power being raised to the top until they eventually run out of energy and continue their fight at the bottom. Meanwhile, for the first fight, while there were moments where they did have a short back and forth at the top, most of the fight you see takes place on the lower level, and while that fight was still a grand spectacle to watch, the power in it was nothing like we're seeing currently. But anyway, back to the fist bump, this moment also reinstates my point of how these two are connecting with each other through an exchange of fists, as we start to get a set of flashback sequences from the past, as well as a visually gorgeous scene of our older Naruto and Sasuke watching over younger versions of themselves from one another's perspectives. There's also a few obvious references they make to the original fight, due to them showing it to us one after the other. I do also believe the scene where Sasuke Susanoo is shooting fireballs up at the sky to hit Kurama as he dodges each one was a callback to the scene where Sasuke was firing a barrage of fireballs while a QB state Naruto was dodging them one by one. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but I think an argument could be made for it. One of the first lines of dialogue that gets exchanged between both of them shows up during the fight, and it's an interesting one. Sasuke makes a comment about Naruto playing defensive, which gives us, the viewer, an indication that Naruto hasn't been going all out in this fight with the intention to kill, unlike Sasuke, but this gets explored more in a little while. As Naruto contemplates on how to handle Sasuke, Sasuke takes the opportunity to activate Kirin, as those fireballs from before didn't necessarily need to hit Naruto, but as long as they went into the sky to raise the air temperature and create a new air current, was enough preparation he needed for his next attack through Kirin. This moment is also an anime only scene, and if you didn't know, Sasuke has only used Kirin once throughout the entirety of the series, and that was during his fight with Itachi. And I think it honestly makes sense to use such a jutsu against Naruto in this fight, as it's always been known as a trump card for Sasuke to show his strength, almost like a god passing judgment from above. He was going to use it at their first encounter in the time skip before getting stopped by Orochimaru, so for me, it only makes sense that it was included here. And I can't lie, Kirin is possibly one of my all-time favorite jutsus. Seeing it come into play for the final time put the biggest smile on my face when I saw it, as I was brimming with excitement. After this moment, Sasuke continues on from his statement earlier about how Naruto will end up dying if he just keeps playing defense. Due to their past experiences with one another, Naruto is well aware Sasuke has connections to the bonds he's trying to wipe away, a path that's for sure going to lead to nothing but misery for Sasuke's well-being, as he'll be suffering all alone. Naruto is aware of how painful solitude is, and so does Sasuke, meaning this isn't something Naruto will sit back and allow, as you can tell how truly emotionally frustrated Naruto is through his expressive body animations, as it really emphasizes the point of how Naruto can't idly sit still and watch this all transpire. Both eventually end up charging towards each other with another large-scale attack, bringing them once back into the realm where another chance for understanding each other presents itself. Here we get to see a more extended version of Sasuke's ideology, to where more important questions need to get answered, such as there being no exact guarantee that the world Sasuke is envisioning will go down the pathway he desires. In fact, Sasuke's idea of a new world could be considered a worse world, since the 5 villages have finally united and the future for the shinobi world has never looked brighter. However, Sasuke isn't stupid. He's realized the only reason this transpired is because there was a powerful common enemy that practically forced the nations to work together, and now with that threat taken care of, who's to say history won't repeat itself? It's interesting to note here that Sasuke has practically become a combination of some of the core enemies that we've seen stride for peace in their own ways, scaring the world into cooperation like Pain, an Uchiha like Madara, and having the chakra history that stems back from its creation years ago like Kaguya. There are also a few references throughout this conflict to other battles Naruto has been a part of, which further back up this point, so I'll make sure to bring up the ones I recognize as things continue. I also think it's a neat touch how these exchanges they have with the clash of their powers into this realm develop more with each time this action takes place. The phrase of when two shinobi can read each other's thoughts simply through an exchange of blows if they're at a high enough level is more meaningful than ever through these moments. The first time was short and held no words, the next time a discussion took place, and now this time an extended conversation on their connection to each of their goals is formed. I thought that was a really neat touch from Kishimoto that shows an evolution of them both growing through power and mind. Once all speaking has ceased, the kaiju battle continues, but this time on a much grander scale. Using the tailed beast, Sasuke harvests her power to form a massively upgraded complete Susanoo, and wow, doesn't this just look so damn cool? The whole lightning aesthetic inside the armor as well as the spear just really hammers in how much of a warrior of the world Sasuke is trying to become, and I absolutely love it. The soundtrack that plays during this moment with the heavy guitars is also just incredible. Naruto attempts to give himself a boost by summoning some Kurama clones, where Sasuke practically mocks Naruto regarding his signature move, saying how it's always been a symbolic way of covering up his loneliness. And Sasuke isn't wrong. Naruto was an outcast right at the very start and had to rely on himself all the time, so when he finally learned his first proper technique, it really makes sense that it's just a bunch of clones coming to back him up. As for him, he's always depended on himself the most to get through his struggles more than anyone else. And while at this moment, Naruto has forged many bonds that he considers to be part of his family, the Shadow Clone Jutsu will continue to be a technique that sticks with him due to Naruto pretty much making it a part of his identity because of how amazing and iconic he was with it. That time of loneliness will forever be a part of him that he can't wash away. It's worth mentioning that it's also ironic that Sasuke of all people said this line, as even now it's shown how acquiring all of this power is just a way for him to bury all of the suffering that comes with being alone. Going back to the fight, this section of the battle, including when they first transformed into the kaiju-like forms, is the least praised from the multiple people I've spoken to as well as what I've seen online. And I think that's reasonably understandable, especially since the very start and end of this conflict has some absolutely amazing small-scale action, which is what a large majority of us Naruto fans love to see. However, that's not to say this middle section is bad, even coming from those who I've spoken to. While in the manga it's honestly nothing special due to it being short-lived, even with a few good-looking panels here and there, the anime completely blows it out of the water and makes this experience 100 times more enjoyable from start to end. I thought this would be part of the fight that I skipped past when it came to rewatching these episodes, but I couldn't be more wrong, as thanks to it having extended scenes, we get to see more so just how much of a beast of nature Sasuke has become at this moment that wasn't really emphasized as well as it could have been in the manga. In the anime, we get to see beautifully choreographed moments like Sasuke smacking away Biju bombs like it's light work, followed by blocking 2 attacks coming from each side, to then showing how brutal and unforgiving Sasuke's character is, to delivering a headshot to an already wounded Kurama laying on the ground. There's also a great change the anime added which further reinstates how they wanted to make sure Sasuke was seen as the strongest player on the field. When Naruto fires off 3 Biju bombs followed by Sasuke countering it with 3 arrows, the arrows go straight through the bombs and hit Naruto, which they really should considering how much energy Sasuke has at this moment in comparison to Naruto. But meanwhile in the manga, there's no sign that the arrows pierce straight through Naruto's attack, as it just results in a power clash explosion instead. So again, the anime added much needed improvements that the source material needed. Another element of this fight that should be taken into account is how this battle goes way above cloud level in the sky, really emphasizing how above they are in terms of power compared to the world below them. Almost like we're witnessing a battle between gods, which becomes even more realized in these next few moments. Once the 2 rivals prepare their final attack, Sasuke comments about the amount of power Naruto is using, believing him to be in the mindset of fighting to the death, just like how Sasuke has been throughout this entire conflict. But yet again, Naruto denies wanting to kill him. He knows this isn't really the true Sasuke he's fighting, because at the end of the day, Sasuke can proclaim as much as he wants about how this goal of his is the right step towards salvation, but that won't stop him feeling the emotions he's attempting to cut away for good. Naruto wants to fight against the Sasuke that's fully true to his own beliefs, one that doesn't need to be suffering in this process. The 2 attacks then launch towards one another to create one hell of an ultimate clash, both the manga and anime depicting this moment to perfection. The manga delivers a beautiful double-page spread of how almighty this attack is, as he made sure to keep in the Hashirama and Madara statues for scale comparison, followed by the next page showing sharp panels cluttered together to match the chaotic energy of destruction that's been displayed in the artwork, then having the bottom 3 panels ease out again back to normal panel layouts once everything has settled down. Meanwhile for the anime, there's some great additions to this scene that the manga is just unable to do. I absolutely love how the music and sound effects have been cut off. Everything is silent as it feels like a hold your breath moment where you're waiting for that break in the silence to arrive, as it gets erupted by the loud clashing of energy energy strikes clashing against the ground like a rampaging storm. I also love at the start of the clash, you can see multiple layers of colors dancing in the ball of energy, building upon the anticipation for the explosion, as it's like a water balloon that's constantly on the verge of giving way. During this complete nuclear bomb, we also see the heads of the stone faces get blown off, which I do feel like symbolizes Naruto and Sasuke surpassing their predecessors. While this might have been a debate before on whether they were truly stronger, it does heavily suggest that it's now confirmed through this piece of symbolic imagery. And going back to my conversation before about this feeling like a battle between gods, this statement truly hits home more than ever through this attack, as they literally changed the weather to rain destruction down upon the world below, just like what gods are capable of. But once we see the atmosphere settle down, even if it is still an extravagant sight, both Naruto and Sasuke emerge from the storm. As mentioned near the start of this topic on the fight, both characters are now ready to fight at the lower level after descending from the top, representing the loss in energy, as now it's going to be a pure endurance test. This section of the battle is so brilliantly executed, as it's the perfect final act for this fight to lead into the closing curtain call. Seeing close quarters combat like this just reminds you why it's something you love to watch, as well as why Naruto is one of the best at handling this type of combat. It feels a lot more personal seeing attacks being landed on opponents like this, because it's your own body making that connection to the other. No bombs flying around or massive strikes of energy, just the body you've been given. That's your weapon, and as stated before, I really did love the crazy monster battle, but you just can't go wrong with fights like this. There's a great moment where Naruto's clones were disguised as rubble to kick Sasuke up with the Uzumaki barrage, not only referencing Sasuke himself, since this is the move Naruto learned from him in the Chunin exams, but as well as the battle with Pain where Naruto's clones appear in the rubble to catch him off guard. Sasuke also has his own moment where he summons Shuriken from his arm to fire towards Naruto, a move he only used once during his fight with Itachi. The soundtrack needs to be mentioned too, as the anime completely hit the bullseye, it being the same soundtrack that was used in their first fight on the hospital roof. This section just knows exactly what to do to make you feel a rush of emotions, and this is especially the case with tension. Not only are both of them practically out of chakra, but their attacks are sluggish and lack refinement, making it anyone's game. Characters are making mistakes, like Naruto tripping over and failing to use his Rasengan, to then a straight 15-second still shot of Sasuke mercilessly striking down Naruto with his fists repeatedly. You can tell how desperate they are to just not be the loser in this fight, and I love that. For this portion of the battle, all music has stopped once more, and while music can make the situation more hype like it did only a moment ago, I think this choice adds a sense of realism to the situation, if that makes any sense. This is a down-to-earth, raw, bloody, and violent set of sequences where you would believe right at this very second that these two characters aren't individuals who possess such incredible feats, like making massive balls of energy and fireballs. No, just two men trying to outlast each other in a gritty fistfight. A test of endurance that shows how mighty their resolve is. While the anime for this is spectacular, such as showing the shaky outline of the characters leaving their body to add on the effect of how powerful and disorientating these hits must be. I've got to give credit where credit is due for the manga, as Kishimoto's rough and sketchy art style has benefited him greatly for this part of the fight. This double page spread with the chaotic paneling that's made from sketchy line borders for the panels emphasizes how extreme the situation has gotten. The quick speed lines and less refined artwork convey perfectly how rough and bare bones the battle is. It is fantastic and is easily one of the best pieces of artwork Kishimoto has delivered for this fight. After this barrage of blows, we get a small flashback of Naruto and Sasuke after a spar match, providing a really clean transition back to the present through Sakura waking up the split second Naruto and Sasuke reach for each other. It's also a very smart way to cut ahead in time a bit, as Sakura was sleeping for the entire fight, only waking up now when the sun is setting. This then cuts back to the battlefield where we see both Naruto and Sasuke still at it. At this moment, both of them have been fighting the entire day, as before this conflict began, Kishimoto made sure to emphasize the sun rising to celebrate Naruto's birthday a chapter before it all took place. From sunrise to sunset, they haven't stopped, and this isn't even including the war. The anime delivers probably my favorite moment from the entire fight right here. A single slow zoom in shot that lasts for a minute and a half, all while we watch Naruto and Sasuke desperately try to get in any hit that counts. It's incredible, as this single shot staying like this for such a long amount of time almost makes you feel exhausted, because there isn't any break to it, matching the emotion emotions these characters must be feeling for what must seem like a never-ending battle with no signs of stopping. The music choice for this section is also spot on, a slow harmony of violins being played to emphasize how honestly sad of a scene this is to watch unfold. Eventually both land a hit to one another, which really can't be described as an attack because of how there was a zero chance any of them felt pain here, just a moment that showed they had reached the end of their ropes. An element to this that can also be noted is how this action parallels their final attacks to each other during their first fight. Naruto lands a hit to the forehead like he did with the scratch to Sasuke's headband, while Sasuke lands a hit to the stomach like he did to seal the outcome of the fight. It's a very neat callback. As the struggle continues and things look like Sasuke has the upper hand, he shows not only an opening for Naruto physically, but as well as emotionally. Even through all of this, Sasuke still called Naruto his friend to what he believed would be his last moments. It's a small statement, but holds a lot of weight to give hope to Naruto, to make him even more confident about how right he is in his beliefs with saving Sasuke from a path of darkness he doesn't want to get consumed by. And while this was Sasuke's slip up in emotion, he's still visibly annoyed by Naruto's constant retaliation, as he should, leading to a really powerful display of Sasuke's frustration thanks to not only how expressive the animation is with his body such as the mouth and arms, but most importantly the delivery of the Japanese voice actor Noriaki Sugiyama. His execution of these lines brilliantly emphasizes how exhausted and irritated Sasuke is, which adds a whole other layer of an emotional performance from his character that you just can't get from the manga. And while Sasuke begs for Naruto to just sit there and die, we know this isn't Naruto's ninja way. He'll see things through to the end, and just like Sasuke said, he's his one and only friend. This then leads to the final few moments of this climactic battle, but first we get a really sweet anime only scene of Naruto and Kurama delivering one last fist bump exchange. While the conversation is still the same as seen in the manga, and there's a great symbolic moment that shows how Naruto was able to befriend such a mass of pure hatred like Kurama and is now attempting to go after all of the hate inside Sasuke too, not including a fist bump was really a missed opportunity, since it's figuratively and metaphorically the perfect way to show their connection and, well, bond with each other. There's also another great anime only scene where the lead up to the clash of Rasengan and Chidori includes the hands of those who support them, helping hone the power to win this final push. Naruto pretty much having almost everyone behind him, while Sasuke only has his brother. Even through everything, Itachi was always true to his word about loving his brother unconditionally. We then get a beautiful seamless transition of all versions of Naruto and Sasuke throughout the ages, showing us how their history has led to these final moments. I love how this time, instead of the clash being horizontal like in their first fight, it's now vertical as Kishimoto approaches this moment in the same visual way done before. And while the artwork is a lot less refined for Naruto and Sasuke, as I've touched upon previously, it still works out perfectly for this scene, especially with the sketchy dramatic shadows that deliver a rough look, as I couldn't imagine the scene conveying the same energy if it was cleaner like in the first artwork. And again, just like the younger selves accomplished, a large orb of energy begins to fill the valley from their clash, but this time on a much more monumental level. The next sequence of events that take place after this fight is anime only content, and I believe its inclusion was a very welcome addition. We see Naruto and Sasuke observing locations from their past that have in some or many ways a core connection associated with the both of them. During this time we also hear the occasional droplet sound effect, which foreshadows the big reveal at the end with the loss of their arms, as it's the sound of their blood dripping through the rocks. But not only is this a neat piece of foreshadowing, it's also a symbolic way of letting us know just how literally connected to one another they truly are at this moment. The blood from both of their arms links one another, so it could be interpreted that their blood is a form of their connection and bond, almost like their blood brothers. But that's very far into the future, so going back to the dream world, we're introduced to a lot of visual imagery from seeing these different kinds of loneliness placed side by side, as that difference is shown when Naruto runs away, all while Sasuke stays still, to then Naruto growing up through the ages on the swing while looking looking at the Hokage faces, apologizing to Tsunade for dying before becoming Hokage. It's all a very somber reflection back on their life, but just as things look dire, Naruto feels a sudden pain in his arm and disappears. This of course being Naruto feeling the pain of having no arm in the real world that forced him to wake up, leaving Sasuke behind in this dreamscape to experience some of his own personal life-changing encounters before soon joining Naruto. I do like Naruto's comments saying "you're finally awake" to Sasuke, as I'm sure there's a slight bit of smugness from his words, as it can be interpreted as him saying "I woke up first, that means I won." And to be fair, Naruto certainly won this fight at the end of the day, even if their bodies are both out of commission. Of course, he not only wins the battle of connection with Sasuke at the very end, but multiple instances in this fight tell us Naruto was not going full out when it came to attacking Sasuke. Not only was he on the defense majority of the time, which Sasuke points out, but he never even wanted to kill his friend, unlike his friend. There was a part in Naruto that always had to hold back, with the only exception being when he gathered nature energy to power up his tailed beast form, but it was only used as a mechanism to make sure he himself wouldn't die, as he had to match the same power output right back at Sasuke. And if it wasn't already clear of the uphill battle Naruto was facing, for the Rasengan vs Chidori clash, Sasuke had the advantage of gravity on his side, while Naruto didn't, meaning there was an extra element for Naruto to fight back against. That's my 2 cents on it anyway, since this has always been a discussion within the community of who truly was the strongest during this fight, and so Naruto was always the most obvious answer. But going back to the start of Naruto and Sasuke's discussion, Sasuke asks a question we've all heard numerous times before, and that's, well, why? Why does Naruto put himself through all of this after everything Sasuke has done to make sure he no longer has any reason to chase after him? And when asking the same question, he'll most likely get the same response back: because you're my friend. This has been a consistent blowback to Sasuke from all of the times Naruto has said this phrase, not exactly sure on how to unravel it all. He knows the answer, but at the same time he doesn't, asking Naruto just what exactly do those words mean. Naruto explains this in one of the most down-to-earth interpretations of what being a friend means to someone, as seeing an individual you care for go through all of their suffering and pain is really an indescribable feeling. It just simply hurts. This is one of my favorite panels in the entirety of the Naruto manga. It's simple yet so incredibly powerful and moving. That one word having so much weight, as this feeling is why you want to look out for those you care for. And I mean, just look at both Naruto and Sasuke in this panel. Naruto didn't need to share this pain, but here he is with Sasuke suffering alongside him in order to reach the bond that he knows is still there. And if that isn't a true friend looking out for someone they wholeheartedly care for, then I don't know what is. This moment is not just an incredibly impactful moment for the reader, but Sasuke too, as we get to see some self-reflection that we never saw from Sasuke's perspective. These next few story beats parallel Naruto's moment of self-reflection with his bond with Sasuke during their first fight at the Final Valley, and it's just really fulfilling and satisfying to finally take a look at how Sasuke truly felt after hundreds of chapters of build-up. We always knew Naruto's perspective, so we were almost put into the same loop as him when it came to trying to understand Sasuke better. While there are clear moments that showcase to the reader a reasonable understanding for why Sasuke takes the path he did compared to Naruto, who remained stubborn, we still didn't truly have the full picture when it came to a detailed understanding of what made his bond with Naruto so special. And in this chapter and episode, it all gets answered. Sasuke always saw his family in Naruto, in Team 7, but while Naruto always saw this connection he was forming with others as his biggest strength, Sasuke felt it was instead his own biggest weakness. Sasuke's desire for vengeance clouded his true feelings, mixing and altering it into a negative reaction which was, well, jealousy. I love how these panels of the flashback to Naruto and Sasuke's conversation at the 5 Kage Summit can now be interpreted as Sasuke saying these things, not just Naruto, because as Sasuke says in the very next panel, it was the complete opposite. For him, Naruto had a strength Sasuke lacked, which allowed him to walk ahead just like Itachi. This panel of Itachi and Naruto standing side by side really just confirms how Sasuke always did see Naruto as a brother, and knowing this, it makes Naruto's conversation with Itachi all the more special now, which the anime takes full advantage of through some anime only content. We see not only the moment where Itachi entrusts Sasuke to Naruto, video, but also one of the best quotes from the series that I mentioned near the start of this video of Itachi informing Naruto of what it means to truly be Hokage. Becoming Hokage doesn't mean people will acknowledge you, but when the people acknowledge you, you can become Hokage. Again, this applies more than ever to Sasuke based on the ideology he was clinging onto at the start of this fight. The next scenes showing a clear difference in how Naruto and Sasuke approach their paths. Sasuke continuously being alone in the darkness, all while Naruto is in the light surrounded by others. This is the moment of realization for Sasuke, where everything clicks. He realizes that he doesn't need to be all alone, by himself. He can be a part of all of this. A future that everyone shares where he no longer has to walk the lone path he always has. We get a beautifully animated sequence of Sasuke's emotions to finding out how easy it is to picture himself alongside everyone. Seeing his facial expression change from realization to regret to acceptance. And speaking of animation, when it comes to this entire episode, it was handled with such extreme care for content that really doesn't have a lot of, if not any, action to it, considering it is more dialogue heavy. And it's clear the animators know this, as the faces are by far the most focused on, which they really should be. A lot of detail has gone into the facial expressions of these characters, considering how their faces are the only body parts moving, helping this conversation not feel flat at all when it comes to the words being spoken, as honestly it helps make this exchange of dialogue feel all the more real and full of life. Because that's what it is, a moment in life of self-reflection to realize the mistakes you made and figure out what truly needs to be done to get on the right path. For the second time, Naruto and Sasuke wake up after falling asleep again, as the sun gradually rises and shines on their bodies with none of that somber dark night in sight. The sunlight symbolizing Sasuke's acceptance of Naruto, who has been in the past referenced as the sun while Sasuke was the moon, leading to these two words.
俺の負けだ。
Sasuke acknowledges his loss. His worldview is no longer something he believes in due to accepting Naruto and everything he stands for. Yet even at this moment, Sasuke is still surprised that Naruto wants him to live after everything he's done. You could only imagine the guilt running through him right now after this moment of self-reflection, as Naruto's reply with him still having faith in his friend is enough to bring the stoic ninja to tears. The final reveal for this chapter and episode being the loss of arms for both Naruto and Sasuke, their bodies resting on top of the stone hands of Hashirama and Madara that have formed a unison sign to represent their peace with one another. Naruto not only having broken the cursed cycle of destiny that himself and Sasuke were a part of, but also finally fulfilling that promise of a lifetime. This fight holds every element of what made the Naruto series so spectacular. From start to end, it keeps your attention, and honestly, for the final moments of a franchise this long in the making, it's exactly the right amount of quality a finale should be delivering. It's clear that not only Kishimoto himself wanted the series to go out with a bang, but as well as the anime staff, as you can just feel the amount of passion that has gone into adapting this conflict that wraps up these two character arcs the story has been following from the very start. And hopefully I've done a good enough job of informing you all on how they've accomplished this. I really put a lot of time into this to make sure it's my best video on the channel so far. I love this fight, and it holds an incredible amount of weight for not only the Naruto series, but as well as the fandom too. So I really wanted to make sure I gave it the care and justice it deserves. And with that being said, if you liked anything I talked about in regards to this discussion on the climactic final battle between Naruto and Sasuke, then please give the video a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you can get notified when I drop my next video. It's for free and it lets me know you're enjoying my content. So if you're at least a slight bit interested, you might as well stick along for the ride. As well, do follow me over on my Twitter account at MikeyUbi. It's the place where I'm most active, so if you do want to message me over there about anything you want, then feel free. And also, please do comment below if there's anything you'd like to talk about, whether it's to do with this final conflict or anything anime and manga related in general. Whatever the discussion is, I'll make sure to check it out. And with this, thank you all so much for watching this video to the very end. Hope you all have a great day and bless.